On your warm-up, which of the 5 congruence criteria could we use to show that the 2 triangles here in number 1 are congruent to each other? AAS, angle, angle, side. We have an angle here, and then a side. Remember, when you're doing this, you can never start with the piece that's in the middle. You have to start with one of the edge pieces, and then you have to move to the next closest marked piece. So if I start with this over here, I cannot come around and then do the side next, because I would be bypassing a side and an angle. You can never bypass 2 parts. I have to move to the next closest one, which would be this angle. While I have to skip over the side because it doesn't have a marking, I move right to the angle. So you're never going to skip 2 parts of a triangle to get to the next closest piece. So angle, angle, side. Or if you did that one the other way around, you would call it side, angle, angle. Either one of those is fine. They mean the exact same thing. What about on number 2? Which congruence criteria could I use there? Good question. I'll come right back to that in just a moment. Let's do number 2, and then I'll come back to that question. I can use angle, side, angle. That side is sandwiched in between my 2 marked angles. So angle, side, angle. All right, so let's go back to the question on number 1. Can we not use hypotenuse leg? This is a great question. So in order to use hypotenuse leg, you have to have the hypotenuse of the triangle marked. The way you will always find the hypotenuse, identify your right angle first, and go to the side that is opposite, that is not touching that angle. That is your hypotenuse. Because we don't have any markings on the hypotenuse, I can't use hypotenuse leg there. We have to know about 2 sides, and one of them has to be the hypotenuse if we're going to use hypotenuse leg. So that is a fantastic question. I'm so glad you asked that. All right, warm-up papers and homework can go into the turn-in tray, and then we're going to be back in your notes where we left off yesterday, which is the bottom of the back side of the 3rd piece of paper. Bottom of the back side of the 3rd piece of paper. All right, so in your notes, we're on number 3, part E. Like I said, very bottom of the page, back side of the 3rd piece of paper. Let's look at part E first. On this one right here, before I even read the given information, is there anything that I'm allowed to mark as congruent? What am I allowed to mark without being told? In this case, I can mark my vertical angles. There are 2 things I can mark without being told. One of them is vertical angles. The other one is a shared side, and that's my reflexive property. All right, so I have my vertical angles marked. It tells me that angle W is congruent to angle V. So here's angle W, here's angle V. And then I'm told that XY, right here, is congruent to YZ over here. Do I have enough to say that these 2 triangles are congruent to each other? Yes, using which congruence criteria? If I'm going to use angle, side, angle, then the side has to be sandwiched in between those 2 angles. Is our side sandwiched in between those 2 angles? No, it would have to be this side right here if it was angle, side, angle. So what can I use? I can use side, angle, angle. Or you could call that angle, angle, side. Again, I don't care what order those letters go in, backwards or forwards, but it does have to have the two angles next to each other and the side not in between them. Because when I look at the picture up here, the side that is marked is not in between those two angles. So side, angle, angle. Let's write our triangle congruence statement. Give me a name for the left-hand triangle. WXY. Which angle in the right-hand triangle is congruent to W? V. So this has to start with V. Did X have a congruence marking on it? Then I have to match it up with the other angle that does not have a congruence marking on it, which would be what? Z. So VZ and then what? Y. And Y in both triangles is marked as being congruent to itself there because those are my vertical angles. All right, last one on this page, part F. Is there anything I'm allowed to mark for free? What am I allowed to mark? My vertical angles here. So angle S on the top is congruent to angle S on the bottom. And then it tells me that S is the midpoint of TV. Well, here's TV, and here's S right here. What do midpoints do? Cut in half. So if I know that S is the midpoint of TV, what can I mark on my picture? Congruence marks on either side. TS would be congruent to VS. It says that S is also the midpoint of UR. Here's UR. And again, S is the midpoint there. So what can I use here to mark this up? How can I mark it, rather? Yep, the middle is S, so RS is congruent to US. Do I have enough information to say that these two triangles are congruent to each other? Using what? Side, angle, side. The angle is sandwiched in between those two congruent sides. So I have side and then angle and then side. All right, I'm going to name the first triangle and you're going to help me name the second triangle so that we match up our corresponding parts. I'm going to call the first one triangle TSU. From T down to S, I'm going across my side that has one congruence mark and then down to my vertical angle. What would correspond to that on the other triangle? V to S. So VSR. Nice work. I want you to skip the next page, so turn it over on the back side. So fourth piece of paper, just flip right over. We're going to do some proofs with triangle congruence. Do you guys remember doing proofs? Oh, it's everybody's favorite. We're going to be using reasons from what we did before, but we're also going to be using our 5 ways that we can prove triangles congruent. What are those 5 ways again? So I'm looking for stuff like this. What are the 5 ways that we can show triangles congruent? When I say, how do we know these two triangles are congruent and which one can we use? That's what I'm looking for right now. Angle, angle, side. Side, side, side. Side, side, angle. Can we use side, side, angle? I've got angle, angle, side. I have side, side, side. Can I do side, side, angle? No, that's not allowed, because if you spell that one backwards, please, yeah. All right, so I've got these 2. What are my other 3? I thought I heard somebody say something, but I couldn't make it out. What did you say? HL, hypotenuse leg. What are my other two? Side angle side, SAS, and one more. Angle side angle. Nice work. We're going to be using one of those 5 in every single proof we do. When we do a proof for triangle congruence, anytime we add a marking to the picture, congruent angles, congruent sides, we're going to write down on our statement side what we're saying is congruent, and on the reason side, we're going to put down why we're allowed to say those are congruent. So first thing I'm going to start with on number 2 is that D is the midpoint of AC. And we're allowed to say that because that was part of our given information over here. Was there anything else that was just given? AB is congruent to CB, so I have to add that in here. AB is congruent to CB. And again, we're allowed to say that because it is given. When I'm writing a proof, unless it has 2 boxes where they already printed given in it, I usually put all my given information in one box here. Thank you. So they had 2 boxes for the given. If I was doing this on my own, I would fit that all up in one box. Is this, AB is congruent to CB, marked for me on the picture already? Yep, right here. If it's not marked on the picture, I'm going to come in and add it. We have what is congruent marked on the picture, we have it written down on our statement side, and we have the reason that we're allowed to have those markings, because it was given. Is there anything on this picture that I'm allowed to mark that wasn't given to me? BD is congruent to itself. That's my shared side. So BD is congruent to BD. Why am I allowed to say that? I've mentioned this a couple times, but I don't know if anybody's heard me or kept it in the back of their mind. It is a shared side, so what property are we using? What can I use to say something is congruent to itself? It starts with an R. Reflexive property. Anytime I have a shared side, we're going to use our reflexive property to say that it is congruent to itself. I used this piece of given information. I didn't have to be given this one. I was just allowed to use that. Have I used this piece of given information, that D is the midpoint? I haven't used that yet, so let's look at our picture. Here is side AC, and it tells me that D is the midpoint of that. What do midpoints do again? Cut it in half. So what kind of a marking could I add to this picture because D is the midpoint? I can add some congruence marks. Where can I add those congruence marks? AD and DC. So I just added marks to my picture. I need to write down what I just said was congruent. We just said that AD is congruent to DC. Why were we allowed to put those marks on the page? What was it that we knew that let us say that? D is the midpoint. So we are using the definition of midpoint there. Look at how marked up our triangle is. Do we have enough information with the way it's marked up right now to say that those two smaller triangles are congruent to each other? Using which one of the 5 congruence criteria? Side, side, side. So my reason would be side, side, side. My statement is that those two triangles are congruent, which they already wrote the triangle congruence statement for me. So all I have to do is recopy that down here. Triangle ABD is congruent to triangle CBD. So we're doing what we did before. We're still marking up our triangles. We're just every step of the way saying, why am I allowed to make that mark? And writing down our reason for it. Let's look at the one right below this, number 3. Number 3 is a flowchart proof. On the top of a flowchart proof is where you put your statements. And on the bottom of a flowchart proof is where you put your reasons. Instead of having it in 2 columns. What have they given us all of on here? They gave us all the statements that are going to be made, all the way to the end. We have to come up with why those statements were allowed to be made. Why are we allowed to say that AB is congruent to BC? Because it is given right here. AB is congruent to BC, given. Is that marked up on the triangle for us? No, then we're going to add that to the picture. AB is congruent to BC. And then I see there's an arrow from that pointing all the way down to the bottom, so I'm not going to use that again until I get to the end. So let's come over here to the right. It says that segment BD is bisecting angle ABC. Why are we allowed to say that? It is given. And now we're going to use that piece of information to make another statement here. It says BD, where's BD in my picture? BD is right here. It says it is bisecting angle ABC, this angle right here. What does it mean to bisect again? It means it cuts it exactly in half, right? If I'm cutting this angle exactly in half, what does that mean? What can I mark on here because I know it's cutting it exactly in half? What can I mark on the picture because it tells me that that segment is bisecting the angle? Yep. Angle ABD is congruent to angle CBD. That's what they have written for me in this box right here. This angle is congruent to this angle. Why did we know that those angles were congruent again? What did they say beforehand that told me I knew? They said bisects. What kind of an object were we bisecting? A segment or an angle? An angle. So this would be the definition of an angle bisector. I got this guy hanging out here. BD is congruent to BD. Why are they allowed to say that? Reflexive property. That's our shared side. I have 3 arrows pointing down at this bottom box. That tells me I have 3 pieces of information about corresponding congruent parts. if you look at our triangle, which congruence criteria could we use to show that these two triangles are congruent to each other? Side, angle, side, side, and then our angle here, and then the side. My angle is sandwiched in between those two congruent sides. So far, so good? Awesome. Let's flip the page over. Look at number 4. They've gone ahead and told me that my first reason is given. So what should my first statement be? D is the midpoint of GE. GE really should have a segment notation over the top of it. Is there any other given information that I have? And FE is parallel to GH. Again, I usually like to stick all of my given information in that very top box. All right, let's see what we can do with that. Looking at this picture, before I even use my given information at all, is there anything that I'm allowed to mark on this picture without being told? I can mark my vertical angles right here and right here. So now we have to think about how we're going to name them. Can I call it angle D? How many angles are up there that have D as the vertex? 4. There's the 2 that are inside my triangles, and then there's these 2 that are outside the triangles. There's 4 total angles there because it's got that X shape. So I can't call it angle D, or you don't know which one I'm talking about. So I have to give it a 3-letter name. D has to be in the middle because it's the vertex. So like this first angle I could call angle FDE. Angle FDE is congruent to, what would I call the other angle? HDG. Or you could call it GDH. As long as D is in the middle, you're good. What kind of angles did we say those were again? Vertical angles. So we are using our vertical angles theorem. All right, it says D is the midpoint of GE. Here's GE. And D is the midpoint of that. What does that mean? It's evenly split. So which pieces would be congruent because D is the midpoint? ED and which one? DG. We added a mark to the picture, so now I'm going to write that down. ED is congruent to GD. Why did we know we could do that? Definition of midpoint. Is there any given information that we haven't used yet? We haven't used anything about the parallel lines. All right, so it says that FE is parallel to GH, right over here. When I have parallel lines, what am I supposed to be looking for? I'm looking for alternate interior angles. Whenever we have those parallel lines, what I want you guys looking for is alternate interior angles. And what kind of a shape helps me find the alternate interior angles? A Z shape. Is there any way that I could connect my two parallel lines with a transversal so that I get like a Z shape? What could I use to connect them? I can use segment FH. I could have also used segment EG. Either one of those would be fine. But once I have this segment FH that I have my Z shape on there, I can see my congruent angles. Angle F is tucked into that corner there, and angle F would be congruent to what? Angle H down here. Angle F congruent to angle H. What kind of angles did we call those again? Alternate interior angles. So we are using our alternate interior angles theorem. Can you what? You could write EFD is congruent to DH, or yeah, GHD. You can write it with 3 letters, yes. If there's only one angle with that vertex, you can write it with a single letter, but you can always write it with 3 letters. Yes. Do we have enough information to say that these 2 triangles are congruent to each other? Yes. With the way it's marked up, I would use which congruence method? Am I going to use hypotenuse leg, or are we going to use side, side, side? What are we using here? Side, angle, angle. I can only use angle, side, angle when it's the side smashed in between those angles. So we're going to use side, angle, angle. Or you can call that angle, angle, side. They already wrote my triangle congruence statement for me, so I'm just going to recopy it down here in this bottom box. Triangle FDE is congruent to triangle HDG. Nice work today. We're going to do a couple more proofs on Monday that are on this page, and then we're going to flip to the next page and try our hand at some more proofs. So we're going to keep rolling with proofs on Monday. We'll get any extra practice we might need with that Tuesday as well, so that we're getting lots of practice with proofs. Your homework, the proofs homework, is due on Tuesday. So we still have another full day Monday. We will review anything that I feel we might need to on Tuesday if we don't get through everything, but the homework is still due on Tuesday. Your test is on Thursday next week. Test is on Thursday. Friday, I'm going to preview what we're going to study after Thanksgiving break, because Friday will be the last day of school before Thanksgiving break. When we come back from break, next Friday is the last day before Thanksgiving break, so we've got 1 more week before Thanksgiving break. When we come back from break, we're going to do our last module, and then we'll get ready for your final exam. One thing I want to make sure that I'll let you guys know, because it kind of passed by quietly this week without me saying anything. The last day I will accept any later missing homework, the last day that you can do any test retakes is December 8th, so we are less than a month away from that. December 8th is the last day I will accept any late or missing homework or any retakes. Have a great weekend, guys. I'll see you on Monday.